What is happening, people? Let's see. We've got to build up a little more people than that. What's going on, everybody? I'm Jody with ARC Racing. Welcome to our first Facebook Live session. Tonight, I'll go over this a couple of times once people start, logging on and viewing. Tonight, we're just going to do kind of an open Q&A session. You can just ask, various questions. Like I said earlier today, what we're going to do is probably take questions and all from this to make talking points for the next few videos. We already got a question. Predator V Twin. Austin, I haven't seen any, Predator V Twins. No one's sent one to us. You're the first person I know of to ask for parts for it. If the demand gets high enough, we make parts for anything if the demand is high enough. That's all I can tell you now. As far as what kind of actual parts are you looking for? Are you looking for flywheel, looking for connecting rod? What I can tell you with that is you can measure your connecting rod that's in it, you center to center. We may have something on the shelf that already works for it. I'm not sure about flywheels. As far as connecting rods, like I say, measure the center to center, your wrist pin diameter, your crank pin diameter, and the center to center, and we may have something that works. What's happening, Cody? The man, I don't know about that. A man maybe, but not the man. But anyway, like I say, I'll probably say this several times tonight. It's just open discussion. Ask questions, things you want to know, things you're curious about. Just open questions. This is my first time doing Facebook Live, so I'm not really sure what all these things down here do. And if you hear something in the background, that's just my cat. He's up here on the table. He may run past the front of the camera a time or two, but just pay no attention to him. This is basically his room. I'm kind of taking over. But I'm hoping that I can do this every other Thursday. That's what I'm looking to do right now. With if I have the time between the dyno work I do and home life, it gets kind of hard sometimes to make the time to do stuff like this. But as of right now, what I'm going to try to do is every other Thursday night around 8 o'clock, do a live feed with some type of topic to talk about. Clone heads. Let's see what question about clone heads. First of all, you're new to this, brand new to racing. Welcome to kart racing. But this is one of the biggest amateur sports in the world. A lot of information, a lot of companies out there willing to help. I'm glad you came to us. Flywheel, piston, carb from us. Not sure what the engine is. Should you update the head? What number head is on it would be the first question I have for you. There's some of the older heads out there that are just as good as any of the new heads that are out today. With what we do to heads now, with the 3-angle valve jobs and stuff like that, we can make the heads flow a lot better than what they did from the factory. Give me the number of the head, and we'll tell you if it's a good one or a bad one. A lot of people out there, they say that there's very good heads and very bad heads. Well, most any head that has been made for these engines are good for something. Some of the heads have, smaller ports on them. They're funneled a little bit more, and they work really good for like plate engines and stuff like that, because that funneling of the port actually helps increase fuel signal, which is what a plate engine lacks, is fuel signal. Because of where the plate is behind the carburetor, it cuts off the air and you just get less signal. And then you got some heads that have a little better looking port, which, were used for the unrestricted type stuff. But give me the number of the head, and more than likely it's something I've used. I can tell you if it needs to be updated. More than likely what you're going to need to do is upgrade the valves, because the valves we have today are a lot better than what used to have. They got the little short valves, the little stainless valves. They're just a lot better product, and do you a 3-angle valve job on the seat, and you probably will be good to go with that. What's the biggest cam for Predator? I get this question a lot. What's the biggest cam I can put in something? You can put whatever size cam you want to in it, but the key to making an engine perform properly is matching the cam profile to the head profile, which is it ported, is it not ported, what size valves are in it, do you have stock valves, bigger valves, what size carburetor are you running. To me, the Mod 2 style cams, the NR 274 cam, the Isky Black Mamba cam, those type of cams with the moderate lift, as I call it, 275, 240 in that area with high duration, they make these stock carburetors work a whole lot better. The Mod 2 style cams like that, they work really good with stock carburetors or slightly bored carburetors, the 625, 650s. But the step above the Mod 2 would either be the Dyno CM cam. It's like a 265 lift, or the Dyno F275, the NR 274, or the Black Mamba cam from Isky. Any one of those cams has got the same type of low profile, high duration, and would work well with stock type carburetor applications. Like I say, it all depends on, you have to match the cam, the carb, the valves, stuff like that. Just got to replace my head gaskets. Thin head gaskets on a lot of the Predator engines, especially like the what I call the non-Hemi, the Gen 1, Gen 3. They're usually a little further in the hole with the piston than most engines are. But one thing you got to remember on these engines, especially if you're 10 thousandths in the hole, 5 or 0, is you have to have a certain amount of piston to head clearance, because these engines are designed for cement mixers. They're designed for water pumps, and they don't turn at 3,600 RPM. That's what the factory designed them to do. We're using them for way above that, and the higher the RPMs you turn these things, the more the crankshaft and the block flexes. And at 6,000, 6,500, 7,000 RPMs, the crankshaft is flexing, like bird wings. It's doing like this. I mean, not that much, but you're looking at, a good 10, 15 thousandths sometimes in each direction as it's trying to stop and start that piston again. So we always recommend a minimum of 30 thousandths piston to head clearance. If your piston is 20 thousandths in the hole, that super thin gasket, if it's 10 thousandths thick or whatever, would be fine. I know some people run tighter than 30. I've actually run engines, at 20, 22 and been fine with it, but the standard measurement is 30 thousandths piston to head clearance. And, a lot of engines today, like AKRAs, will run 5 thousandths piston in the hole, and, 2 head gaskets, which, both of them are 9 thousandths, that's 18 thousandths worth of head gasket. Then we'll cut the head shorter to get the CCs where they need to be. And that tends to help the engine a little bit, because it brings the valves down close to the bottom of the head and what's called unshrouding them a little bit. There's several ways you can do it, but you still need to make sure that you got that piston to head area sufficient enough, because if the piston makes contact with the head even just a little bit, the piston stops momentarily, and that squishes the oil out of the connecting rod and gets metal to metal contact, and that creates, the rod could burn, it could lock to the crankshaft, or it could just open the clearances up and hammer the rod and make it break. But you need to, if it's the Hemi 212 Austin, most of those I believe come with the thick head gasket on it, and you'll probably be okay with running the super thin gaskets, 10, 12 thousandths thick, but still you need to make sure that you got the sufficient clearance. Daniel, depends on what you're using that GX270 for. If you're using it for, lawnmower pulling, I know several guys that do, lawnmower pulling, lawnmower racing, they use a 270 and they're getting a lot of horsepower out of it. The problem with the 270 is it's off the same block design as like a GX390. There's a little bit of difference in them. Some of the parts work, some don't, but it's the same basic design, so it's a heavy block. So if you're using this for like kart racing, the 270 is going to be on the small end of your cubic inches. And the old saying, there is no replacement for displacement. The only way to outrun cubic inches is with more cubic inches. So if it's for karting, you're going to be on the low end of the horsepower scale, the horsepower to weight ratio scale with a 270, than you will with like a 390 or 420 or 460. But you can make some good horsepower with GX270, and we have connecting rods and flywheels, and you can get camshafts. I believe the 390 camshafts fit in them, so we have camshafts and springs and all for them on our website. Just go to our website and type in GX270 to pull up everything that you need to know for it. But you can get good power out of them, but it depends on what you're using it for. How to purchase? That's simple. Just go to arcracing.com and you go from there. Any type of engine, the way our website is set up, you can go in and type in whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for OEM clone connecting rod, go to the website. Top of the page, right below the ARC icon, is a search box, and you just type in clone connecting rod, and it will pull up the stock connecting rods, the performance cast rods, and all the billet rods we make for it. We have a very simple website. If you can get to the website, then you're able to find anything you need to know. Just type it in, and it will pull up that, and any parts that you pull up to use or pull up to look at to buy. It usually has a related item. Like if you pull up, 6270 connecting rod, which is the stock length billet rod for the Honda clone engines, the related parts will show you what the rod bearing and the rod bolt is that go with that. So next time when you order the rod and it's time to rebuild, you just go on the website. If you're not sure what rod bolts or whatever to order, just go on the website, type in the 6270 rod, go into it, and it'll pull up related items, and it'll give you the parts that you need to reorder. Okay, Daniel, if it's on a yard cart and all you're doing is going around the yard with it and playing in the neighborhood, the GX270 is fine. It can make. I know people that's claimed on dynos that I trust, in the low to mid 30s with GX270s. It's probably fairly easy to get mid to high 20s out of it with just a little bit of work. Head work, cams, carburetor. It's gonna be easier to make 20 plus horsepower with that engine than it would be, easier and cheaper, I must say, to make it with that engine than it would be like a 212 or a clone Honda GX200. It'll probably be a little more dependable. You won't have to turn the amount of RPMs that you would with the small block engine, but it'd be fine for a yard cart. Yes, sir. Yeah, 212 would pull you fine. It's over the past couple of years, especially this past year. I've been amazed with the type of horsepower that me and other builders and all have been able to get out of these 212 engines, and taking a little $100 Chinese engine from China, taking that little engine and the type of stuff that we do to it, we're pushing it way, way, way above what it's made for. And there's a certain threshold as far as compression and RPMs and all, and if you know where it's at, and a lot of people know where it's at and will tell you, you get into the mid-20s with these engines, you need to start putting some bracing on them. Anytime you build a modified engine, a billet side cover is going to help you. But the type of horsepower we're getting out of these engines is mind-boggling sometimes, and how dependable they are. And as cheap as they start out, they last good. And but as far as the 212s, the clones and stuff like that, the Hondas. And I tell people all the time, they call me up and I keep blowing jugs off of it, or I keep breaking this and breaking that. I don't build any engine over 12 to 1 compression. Any. My Outlaw engines, my big engines, they're 12 to 1 or less. And I may sacrifice a little bit of bottom end power for that, but we gain it back in the mid to upper ends. Plus, it makes the engine more durable. You get a lot more races out of it. If you're running a 212 Stalkers TK and outrunning 390s, you're doing good, brother. Keep up the good work. Always been a flathead guy. Modified part combinations, Chris. You know, that's the beauty of these overhead valve engines, the clone and the Predator. It doesn't take a whole lot to make good horsepower out of them. You know, if you're doing modifieds, if you're going to be running, of course, if you're going to do modifieds and you say limited modified, I'd first of all recommend a Tilliston. That's the easiest way to make power in these. You know, go in there, increase the valve size in the head. You know, go up to 27, 28, 28 and a half on your valve sizes. On the intake, port it, 308 cam, ratio rockers, not ratio rockers, billet rod, of course with the Wiseco piston, the long rod, billet side cover. A lot of this stuff with these engines is just bolt-on stuff. That's why we love these engines. It's just bolt-on. A lot of the extra horsepower made is in the heads. How you port it, matching, like I was saying before, matching valve size to carburetor size to cam profile. You know, I'd rather, a lot of people argue with me about this, but I'd rather have a moderate lift cam with a little more duration with some ratio rockers and a valve size of 27 to 28 than I would with a really high lift cam and a big valve. Because that high lift cam, more lift, more duration means more RPMs that you're going to have to turn the engine to get the power out of it. It'll make the power band longer and taller, and that bigger valve is also going to move the power curve up. So unless you want to turn one 9500, which that's another one of those areas where these engines don't like, is 9,000 and above. I know people do it all the time and they get away with it. That's great. You're doing a good job. I like to turn these engines 83, 85, 86 maybe at the most, and matching the cam profiles to get the power in that RPM range, you know, 65 to 8,000 or somewhere around in there. And you know, once you find the combination to match all those parts with, you know, building these engines is not as hard, especially the modifieds, as people want to think. It's all in the heads, matching part for part for part to get the power curve where you want it. Yes, Terry, I'd run a 304 on my Outlaw style engine. In fact, if y'all remember the dual engines that I built, the dual engine kart I built last year, one of those engines started out as my Outlaw engine. It was a stroker, stock bore Predator, had a 28 millimeter intake valve in it, 308 with 1 to 2 rockers on it, I believe is what it was. And it would put out a little over 28 on my dyno. Now you get talking about dynos, it's like shoe sizes. Everybody's is different. You know, that engine on somebody else's dyno might have been 26. It might have been 29 on somebody else's, but on my dyno that does all the testing for ARC racing, it would put out, you know, in the 28 range. I drop it down to the 390s, the 390 carburetors when I put it on the dual carts, and it took about 1.5 to right at 2 horsepower away. It was in the mid 25s to almost 26s. And you know, you throw a stock appearing carburetor on that same, which I wouldn't run a stock appearing carburetor with that cam and ratio profile because it's just a little too aggressive in my opinion for it. But it'd probably be in the, you know, in the low 20s with that. But yeah, the 304 is a good carburetor. You know, and we don't sell alcohol carburetors. We have a little, I think it's a 334, I believe it is, a little gas carburetor, but the carburetors that I run either come from EC carburetors or competition carburetors. That's the two people that do carburetors for me. They the best in the business. Those two companies they good at what they do, and I've never had a problem with none of their carburetors. So 304 is a good one. I don't think the Predator engines will ever overtake the clones in sanctioned racing. Backyard racing, outlaw racing, it already has. Because when you go to an outlaw race, like when we go to my home tracks or Crossroads Motorsports Park in Jasper, Florida, and I got another little track up above me, JL's, that in Macon, that you don't see clones in the outlaw class. It's the Predators, because the Predator 212 is a bigger engine. It's got a 75 thousandths bigger bore and a 40 thousandths longer stroke on average than a clone. Plus, they come with bigger valves already, so it's a better platform to start with. And it's already overtaken the clones in many places, far as building from what you got. Now, there's a lot of people take the Honda blocks, put 3-inch bores in them. That ain't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about standard stuff. But as far as it overtaking the stock, no, it will never take over. I don't think it will, because of the way the box stock project engines, the yellow engines that we run, and the red engines from Dyno, they come from factories where the tolerances are really tight. They're not perfect. None of the engines are perfect. I don't prefer one over the other. I've used them all. We sell the box stock projects because we've sold some of the dyno engines. I've used them. You turn out the lights, the engines are the same to me. That's just my opinion. But they come from factories where the tolerances are a lot tighter, and they're watched, and they're all the strokes are within a certain amount of the same. All the bores are the same. In the hole with the piston is relatively close to each other. You take 10 box stocks or 10 red engines from dyno, measure them, and they're going to be a few thousandths differences here and there. You take one of the Predator engines and go to measuring it. I've had some of the non-Hemi Predators come 5 in the hole. Most of them come 20, 30, 40. I've had some that was 60 in the hole. And those of y'all that's been in this long enough remember back when the clone first come out. That's the problem that we had with them, is we run them right out of the box, and this guy over here has got an engine that the valves are seated in better. It's just the way they cut them, and it's 5 in the hole with a 10,000 head gasket on it. He's got more compression, and the crankshaft may have had a little more stroke on it. May have been built a little bit looser. This engine over here, the piston's 20 in the hole with a 45,000 head gasket on it. You can't compete that way, and that's the whole reason why AKRA, NKA, WKA, all the other sanctioning bodies, they adopted the clone engine, like the BSPs and the Reds, because they were closer together. And the Predator will never take over because of that. There'd be too much work involved. The average guy couldn't keep up that way, because the average Joe builds his engines, in his garage, like most of karting still does. Can't keep up with the builders because they don't have the equipment to deck the heads, to deck the blocks, and do they know if the crankshaft is legal in them? I've had some Predators, the average stroke on them is like 2-inch 165 thousandths. I've had some as low as 138 and as high as 175. That's a big difference right there. And the clones, you got a lot less. Everything's just tighter, and that's why they'll never take over. Sorry I got so long-winded. David, cam for a green plate. I still run the BSP3s in most of the engines, CL2s. That's the two cams I run in green plates and purple plates. In the blues and unrestricteds, I've gone to either the CL2 R2 or the CL3. But as far as the greens, I still use the BSP3. In most of them, honestly, CL2s every once in a while, it's depending on the build, what I'm doing for them, what kind of series they're running in, because just the CO2 and the BSP3, the grind is just, I just find a better power range right there. We just got some new heads in yesterday. Now for the green plate, I'm still running the JT 136 head. Like I was explaining earlier, the way the ports are on those heads, they kind of funnel in right before it goes to the valve, and it picks up the fuel signal a little bit. And I've just found that those heads work better on the smaller plates, red, green, purple. I treat a blue plate like I do an unrestricted, but that's the cam I run, David. Okay, TK, that's that 274. Is that one of the NR cams? They make good cams. I've had several in engines that turned out real good. But back to the plate engines, David. Green plates, I've done a lot of green and purple plates over the past several months. And with the BSP3s, I don't run a lot of spring pressure on them. You know, people, they want to call up and order ahead for a green, and a lot of people, I don't know why, but well, I kind of do know why, because there's sometimes, anyway, I won't get into that, but when they order ahead from us, they'll take it home, they'll take it apart, they'll measure everything, which that's fine, that's no big deal. You're just double checking, making sure you're getting what you paid for. And they'll measure the springs in it, and they'll be way below spec, and call up and ask why. Well, a green plate, you're not turning it 7,000. You're turning a green plate 58, 61, 62 in some cases. You don't need all that spring pressure. So I use, on all my engines that I have locally, the ones I run myself and some others that I help out here locally, the unrestricted springs, we'll probably run those 2 races. When I change those, I pull them out, I throw them in a box, and that's what I use for, red plate and green plate, sometimes purple plate if the pressure is where it needs to be. But you don't need all that, spring pressure on, especially a green plate. I usually set my spring installed height. I don't set it at 815 minimum. Usually, 820, between 820 and 825, and use, wore out springs as I call them. And that's one of the tricks to plate engines to get them to rev up quick, is lighten up the springs on them, as well as lighter valve train stuff and all. But so I got a call. Forgot to turn my phone off. They can wait. Anyway, let me roll back and see if I missed anything. Ed, our unrestricted springs, if everything is set right, we typically, I change mine every 4 races, but other people are, Wayne, you ain't too far behind me, brother. Other people like to change them every race, every 2 races, whatever's comfortable with you. I tell my guys, you can run them every 2 races, but an important thing about springs, whether it's an unrestricted, a plate engine, or whatever, is anytime that engine is fired up, I don't care if it's for 5 seconds in your shop or you just run 50 laps on the racetrack, as soon as you cut it off, rotate the engine around to the compression stroke, because the head temps on these things is excess of 400 degrees. Your springs are 400 degrees also, and if you stop the engine and one of the rockers is pushed down, got the valve open, that spring is compressed, and it's compressed at 400 degrees. That's not excessively hot for steel, but it's still compressed while it's hot. And if it cools that way, chances are that spring that's compressed will lose tension. I go to these big races and state races and all, and I watch person after person after person come in after a race or a heat race or qualifying, shut their engine off, put it on the stand, and go over there and start working on tires. It takes 2 seconds, if that long, to reach over, pull the rope, pull it around, and bump it on compression stroke. And what that does is that closes both valves, which means both of the springs are in their natural position, and they cool in a natural position, and they'll last a whole lot longer that way because they're not being overly compressed. Working springs like this is how they're designed to work, but when you got one stopped like this and it's compressed, it will lose tension, especially these little old 10.8 springs that we use now. The springs now are a whole lot better than they used to be. I don't think anybody out there has got springs that I wouldn't run. I mean, we had our own springs for a while. We still get them. We sell the dyno springs, the green stripes and the red stripes. Great springs. I really don't have a problem running any of them. And like I say, usually I change mine every 4 races. But most of the people that I build engines for, they go on 2, which is fine with me. But maintaining your spring maintenance is just as important as changing your oil or anything else. But it'll make them last a whole lot longer. And I've actually done some work on the dyno doing that, getting the engine up to like 450 degrees and running it and stopping it and making sure that that one of the valves are open, and I let them cool, completely cool to the touch. Take them out and measure them, and they've lost over a pound, the one that was compressed. So spring maintenance is important. Craig, optimum head temp. Every builder is going to tell you something different. I know some builders that tell you don't even run a head temp in it. Don't even run the lead, just run it. My dyno tells me different. My dyno tells me 400 to 420, maybe 425 is the area where the head is getting hot enough to pre-ignite fuel. I mean, I don't know if that's what it's actually doing, but I do know that when my engines and other engines I've had from other builders on my dyno, 430, 440, 450, I start seeing top end power drop off. It ain't dramatically, but 2-3 tenths is a lot at 6,800. So I tell people 4 to 420, 425 maybe. A lot of times restrictor plate engines will run a little cooler because of the way, especially the way I build carburetors. I'm running restrictor plate engines primarily off the low side jet. There's many cases where I run the low side jet 2, 3, and 4 thousandths bigger than the main jet, and they run a lot cooler. I got some people that tell me they can't get my engines over 360, 375, maybe 380 fully taped up. And I tell them as long as it's running and everything's going good and they still got straightaway speed, top end speed, out the corner speed, run it. If you want to drop the jet size, drop it. But that's jet sizes and stuff like that as far as head temp, that controls head temp a lot. And I tell people the way to remember which way to go with the jetting when you got overheating or underheating problems is use fuel like you would a coolant. If the engine won't get up the temperature and you got it completely taped up and your timing is set right and everything is right, you got too much fuel to it. And a lot of times when you got too much fuel, it'll be kind of sluggish on top end. Not all the time, but sometimes. But mainly the heat won't come up on it. You take some fuel away, take some coolant away, and the head temp will go up. And vice versa. If the engine's running too hot, some people build engines to run hot like that. That's the way they want them. That's them. But my engines, if it's running too hot, you go up one size, on the main jet, you add more fuel, more coolant to it, and it cools the engine down. And most of the time, with my engine especially, it makes them run better. Jim, we love people that love our stuff. We take a lot of pride in building our stuff. We take a lot of extra steps that we don't need when we build our stuff. We won't, if it's not jewelry quality, we're not happy. Not that that makes it run any better, but it sure makes people feel better when they buy something and they take it out of the box and they're like, wow, this is nice. I mean, this is shiny. A lot of people think we polish our products. We do not polish anything. That's the way they come off the machine. But that like a lot of pride in our stuff. We love to hear people, compliment our products. Especially the way they look. That says a lot. This is one. This flywheel has been out here in my shop for a while. This is something I use for testing. You notice it's got some scuffs on it, but we take a lot of pride. Steven Reynolds, I'm the man because I race with the men. Yeah, Ed, I'm covering a lot quick. The best way to do it is get in here and jump on it. Don't wait around for people to come up, because a lot of people will be probably joining later on. But the thing about this is this video is going to go online and people can go back and look at it. And any questions I don't get to tonight, I'm going to do my best to go back, in the next few days and answer them, me or Hunter. Bradley Bush, that's the only way to keep anything. If you can't eat off of it, ain't no use in having it. So I assume that, that engine that's sitting on your go-kart's clean enough to eat off of, right? For some reason I'm having a hard time reading this tablet. I don't know if my contacts are getting blurry or what, but these are kind of old. I got in. But Craig, back to your max head temp thing. There's something I forgot to say. You see online all the time, Bob's Four-Cycle, Kart Tech, all these other places, people consistently blowing head gaskets. They can't keep head gaskets on it. I know people just had to change them at the racetrack. A lot of times just because, the machining, they don't get the heads decked or the blocks decked, and the machining surfaces aren't flat and they just don't seal off. But 95% of the time when people can't keep head gaskets on these box stock engines, they're running too much head temp. Probably caused by way too much timing, because there's some people out there running 39, 40 degrees timing in these, pro adult stock engines, which if it's working for them, that's great. But that leads to a lot of gasket failures, a lot of head temps. And once you blow a gasket, once the head and block, or mainly it's the head that warps because it gets so hot, once the head warps and blows the gasket, a lot of times you won't get one to seal after that. You're going to have to get it machined and resurfaced and stuff like that. And also, once that head warps that way, the seats, a lot of times the valve seats, they may not actually move, but when the head's warping while it's hot and them seats are banging, or valves are banging against the seats, it'll cause the valves to start leaking. And once the valve leaks, especially the intake valve, once it starts leaking, your power goes down, because at 6,500 RPMs in an adult engine, that valve is opening and closing so fast that the fuel and air is in almost a straight line. It's almost uninterrupted. But when that valve closes and that piston comes up and that combustion happens and it blows combustion back through the intake valve, it slows down that intake charge and kills your power. So too much head temp can cause a whole lot of problems, mainly power loss and gasket failure. Travis, the timing on the flywheel video and all, it's a pretty good video. It's a little too long in my opinion. I put too much into it, but if they would let me release the outtakes on that, I think we could make a whole lot of money on some DVDs overnight, because some of the outtakes on it are so funny. There's a lot of bleeping going on, if you know what I mean. I usually don't have a problem speaking at shows or live, because it just comes to me. But when I sit down with those videos and I work out a little, you know, I guess you could call it little sketch or whatever. I go over it so many times in my head, and I'm out there sometimes talking to the guys, and I'll repeat it to them. But as soon as that camera light comes on, I turn into Elmer Fudd, and I get to talking, and I'll say a word backwards, or I'll say a phrase backwards, and the more I do it, the madder I get. And they're really funny. If they'd let me put them on DVD and release it, we can make a lot of money overnight. But I appreciate that. I worked really hard on that video. That little 30-minute video took me, I think, 3 days to shoot. And a lot of parts thrown. Did you ever get to deal with Craig Summerlin? Yes, I did. I didn't know. Craig Summerlin, that's the guy that was from Savannah, if I'm not mistaken. If it's the same guy, I never got to meet him. I talked with him years ago on the phone when I was working at another place. And like I say, if that's the Craig Summerlin from right outside of Savannah that died a few years ago, yeah, I got to deal with him a little bit on the phone, but never heard nothing bad about him. Good guy, real good guy. A lot of good guys in this business. I've heard that a head needs a valve job after 3 races. Bryce, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you race in the same area. I think you're from the Arkansas, Oklahoma area. I could have you mistaken with somebody else, but there's a lot of my stuff that runs out there. And I hadn't seen some of those engines in over a year. I hadn't seen a couple of them in almost 2 years. And so unless you run your head temp, like I was explaining a while ago, way too high, and you get head warpage and stuff like that, I see no reason, if the valve job was done right, I see no reason to send something back after 3 races. But that's just me. Man, some engines I don't get back till after a year. And they send them back just because they've run them so long. Now, with the way we're running the AKRA Pro Stock engines now, we're turning a lot more RPMs than we used to. So I tell people, 14, 15, 16 races, as long as you change your valve springs like you should, that's going to be about the limit. Because we're turning these things, 68 plus in some places. That's kind of stretching it for those stock rods, 15 races, but we've had really good luck with them in that length of running. But no, I don't think an engine needs a valve job after 3 races, in my opinion. Keith Meek, I've heard of you. Keith's won a good deal of stock appearing races on our stuff. He's got one of our engines this is a stock appearing engine. If I'm not mistaken, it's got 14, 15 races on it. I want to say it's a 212 stock appearing. Build internals. I ain't gonna go into what's in it, but it's got the bored out stock appearing 675 carb on it. And I'm wanting to say he turns it 8,000 plus, if I'm not mistaken. And it's got, I know, 14, 15 races on it. So he hadn't had a valve job after 3 races because I hadn't seen that engine in almost a year, if not longer. So Keith needs to send it back. It's about time, buddy. Yeah, Bryce, we hooked up with some good people out in Arkansas. I'm glad that I got involved with these guys, even some guys that don't run my stuff. I'm glad that I got to know them, if not nothing but over the phone or on Facebook, stuff like that. There's some really good racers out there, and I got hooked up with some really good guys. They've won a lot of races for us. They've won several indoor national races for us, and even old Bradley Bush has won a race on my stuff. He, I believe he won the Run What You Brung at one of the indoor races last year on one of my 390 carburetor Outlaw engines. And I think he's still working the kinks out of his back on that and when he stood on that throttle. But, yeah, Keith, like I was saying a while ago about the 3-angle valve job every 3 races, he turns it 83 to 8,500, and it's got 14 races on it. If the valve job is done right, it only I don't want to go into too much detail on how we do stuff like this, but when you work your 3 seats, your 3 angles on your seat, you don't put the same angle on the valve that you do on the seat. I'm not going to say which way we go with it, but as it wears, it just keeps moving down. Now, like on a Pro Stock, you may see a little bit of, very, very little bit of installed height add to it after 15 races, because the valve's worn, the seat's worn, and the way you cut it, it just moves on down and it keeps sealing as long as the valve guide don't wear out. Because the valve guide starts wearing out, then the valve starts rocking and it's hitting the seat at awkward angles and causes it to wear unevenly, and then you may have problems after a few races. But dang, 8,500. Yeah, you need to send that engine back, Keith. It's time for a freshen up. But engines like that, I'm kind of scared to mess with, because that same Outlaw engine that Bradley won on, he sent it, that belonged to somebody, that belonged to Portwood, I believe. He sent it back for a freshen up, and I blew it up on the dyno. It blew the block in half, and I had to build him another one. But I get scared sometimes, these modified engines. I hate to mess with them. I know I got to. They're running so good. They've had no problems with them. I guess that's kind of a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type thing. But then again, I don't want them to send them back to me in 7 pieces in a bucket because we went too long with it. Rebuilds are cheaper than new engines. But, Portwood and them, Bryce Portwood and Bradley and Cody Hill and even that Dakota kid, they all some good guys. I'm glad I got hooked up with them. I hope we run with them for a long time. They've done a lot of good for us out there. Done a lot of good advertising for us. We sold a lot of stuff, and because of them, and I appreciate them. I appreciate all my engine guys that I do for. We send engines all over the country. I've got some that I send to Aruba and not Aruba, Bermuda, and places like that. We've sent a couple to Australia, and but we got good guys all over the place, and that's something that I have the luxury of doing, unlike other builders. Other builders are in the business of building engines to sell. We're in the business of building parts for those people to build engines to sell. That's why you never see us advertise engines. You won't see our engines advertised in any magazines. You won't see our engines advertised online at any of these races, because that's not what we do. That's just what I do, mainly to test our parts. That's what my job originally is they make it, I break it. And I suck at my job because I rarely break anything other than things that it bolts to. But, we just build engines because we can. And we don't have to build them, but we do just because we can, and because it turns into good advertisement. But, the biggest reason you don't see us advertising because the people that my engines are racing against, are my customers. Everybody at the racetrack somehow or another buys stuff from us, whether it's builders or racers or whatever. But just you won't never see us advertising. But people like Portwood and Bradley and them have done a real good job advertising for us. Well, Bradley, buddy, if that engine ruins your shorts, I need to put you on this 390 that I got sitting in the shop, or the one that's sitting on my table that I'm building now, because it's probably right at twice the horsepower of what you rode, if not more, probably more. Now, see that engine, I forget what that engine put out, but yeah, it's probably right at twice the torque of that one. I put it to you that way. It's a fun ride. And in fact, we're going this weekend to a track to run a 390 some, and because I went one night to test it and had a problem with the brakes again. I don't know why I keep having problems with brakes on that thing, but I want to go get a good run in on it and really really stretch its legs and see what she'll do. And here we go. Dakota, I think he handled it pretty good. I mean, he won, and there was some pretty stiff competition out there, and there was some pretty good engines. I knew some of the guys that was out there racing. He was racing against some good stuff. Bradley done good. I was proud of him. I can get you on one, Dakota, if you ready. And all that working out you doing might pay off when you step on one of these throttles. Well, Jeff, I need brakes. You've ever rode, a dual engine kart or a 390 kart or one of these UAS karts, you want some brakes. These people come in saying you don't need brakes, they more men than I am, because I want it to stop. I'm 40 years old, and it hurts when I hit something now. 20 years ago, I could bounce off something, change my drawers, and go back out there and do it again, but now I have to come home and let my wife rub me down because it hurts when I wreck now. Well, Dakota, we can get you hooked up, brother. You just let me know. Just let me know. You can make them look good, physically or on the track. I mean, 'cause have you actually seen Bradley's engine? It don't get more than that. That's all I'm saying. I can't believe I done that with his engine. But about time you get on here, Portwood. Been on here bragging about you and you ain't even said nothing. No, Bradley, nobody's got an engine like yours. And I'm kind of glad for it. I'm still cleaning gold glitter out the back of the shop. These boxes back there that, some of the guys have been moving stuff and making room for us, just moving pallets out the way and just kind of rearranging stuff. And they come walking back up, to the front of the shop, and they got gold glitter on their shoes or on their hands, and that's because of you. Shannon Portwood just got off of work. You mean you just got out of the recliner? You just woke up from your nap. Craig, there really is no minimum on in the hole for unrestricted. There is, you can't have any pop out, which means the piston, can't be out of the block, and they have a block they put across it and roll the engine. If it hits the block, you got pop out. But I do different things with different engines. There's some engines out there that, I'll set 20 in the hole and, run 1/10,000th gasket on it and cut the head and this, that, and the other. But typically, most engines I keep them between 5 and 10 in the hole if I can. Depending on how I got to cut the block, or, some blocks come in at 5 in the hole and I have to plane them, because they're uneven, and they'll wind up being 0 or sometimes some sticking out, and I got to search for another crankshaft or put a 5,000th shorter rod in it. But I typically like to set most of my stock engines between 5 and 10 if that's where I can get them. And a lot of my modified engines, especially if I use like the Predator block that's a taller deck height, the old style, the non-Hemi, I like setting them around 20 because I cut the heads down, really close on them. High lift cams, and I run, 1 to 2 head gaskets on it, and yes, I do use the stock metal head gaskets on modified engines. Never had a problem with them. But really is no minimum on that. It's just all depending on what you're doing with the engine, how you want to cut the head, and this, that, and the other. But typically 5 to 10 is where I do it, and we'll run 2 metal head gaskets on it, cut the head to get my CCs where I want it, which is, I think AKRA is still 26.5, but I set them around 27 because you don't want to go right to the max on anything on these engines, because some things wear funny, some things, they'll wear out of spec, they'll wear under spec. You got to have a little bit of, wear room there on stuff, or you'll get caught with it. I know a lot of people that set their lift on their cams, for AKRA, dead on 238, dead on 242. They'll run a race, they'll get teched, they'll get tossed because one of them will grow. Typically, I've seen as much as 4 thousandths more lift on an engine after it's been run for a while, because of valve float. What happens is, luckily I got some parts here. I went there and grabbed out of my shop a while ago. But one of the things that happens with these valves, with these rocker arms, is when you float the valves on it, it floats, and then when the valve makes contact again after it floats, it hits around the center area. And any of y'all that's ever used your rocker arm to set your lift, what I mean by that is, when you put your rocker arm on, zero out the lash and all the way we used to do it before the rules changed, but you go down on your lash, on your lift, and your lift might have been 2 thousandths too much. It was like dead on 238, 239 for your intake. So you'll come up here and you would grind a little bit, off the very end of the ball, which the furthest contact, that lessens the lift. And just you get your lift set back down where you need it to. I usually allow myself 4 thousandths on both valves. So if it's the max is 238 on the intake, I set it at 234. 242 on the exhaust, 238 is where I set it when it goes out the shop. But you cut that right there, and that backs the lift up. But if you cut it in the center of the rocker, flatten it out a little bit right there and not the top, that will actually add lift to it. And that's what happens when they float. They'll float, and it actually, goes off the valve for a little bit, and then as it comes back up, when things are, after the spring catches it and it brings it back up, it hits right in the center, where in the center of the what I call the ball on the rocker arm right there, and it makes an indentation. And after that happens so much, that wears out right there and it flattens out, and it'll add lift to it. That's why I tell people, if you've got an engine that was built, or you build it, I build it, whoever built it, after it's been run a couple or 3 races, it don't hurt to have the lift checked again. Because like I say, I've seen some grow as much as 4 thousandths after it come off the dyno. I could, after 5 or 6 races, it could gain more than that. But the most I've seen is 4 thousandths. So I usually set mine about 4 thousandths under. But now the way the rules are, they don't check the lift after the race like they used to. Used to, you'd come in, they put the gauges and all on it, and set the lash at 0, and then roll the cam and check the lift. Now they check it as run. So typically most people run 1 to 2 thousandths lash on the rocker arms cold. I usually run mine as close to 0 as I can get it, but most people run a couple thousandths on it, and that gives you a little bit of breathing room there on your rockers. I'm trying to back up to see the next WikiLeaks with engine building secrets. Nah. A lot of builders, and I include myself in this, we put in a lot of hours to learn the stuff we know. That's why I have been having problems making videos, like the tech videos that I've had. I dedicate a lot of times 2 Saturdays a month to get out there on the dyno and be out there all day and trying stuff. Trying different cam grinds, trying different timing, working on carburetors. I spend a lot of time working on carburetors, and a lot of people don't want to give that stuff away, because they've worked so hard on it. I tend to give away a lot more than most people do because, like I said before, I'm not in the business of building engines. I'm in the business of building parts so that builders can build engines. You know, and us builders, we talk back and forth all the time. You know, a lot of people don't think that, but, you know, I call people, people call me, and we talk. And we discuss things. If we've learned something, if we've seen something, we pass it on. But as far as being the WikiLeaks of engine building, nah. Not too many people know where I live, and I got a feeling that they would come after me. Larry, yeah, we're still in Albany, Georgia. I guess that's what you would say. Yeah, Georgia. Always been in Albany, Georgia, and I hope we always stay in Albany, Georgia, because that's, 20 minutes from my house. I hate commuting. I had a job where I commuted 40 miles, where I worked at before I come to ARC, 40 miles one way, and I was down there for over 12 years. So I've wore out a couple of vehicles. I like that short commute. But yeah, we're in Albany. We're right across the road from the Marine Corps Logistics Base in Albany. How much power does the glitter add? Well, in Bradley's case, it adds a lot. In other people's cases, it actually takes power away. I got behind here. Yeah, I tend to, when I get to talking about stuff, I tend to kind of wander off. I told people that, we're going to have topic discussion. Like the next one, the next feed that we do will probably be, have a topic. We'll talk about timing or whatever. But I told people I wanted to put a topic on it so we wouldn't wander off. I was actually doing that for myself because usually I'll get to talking about something and something else will pop in my head and I just keep talking. That's why they made me do this, because I guess I'm the mouth of the company. I have no problem talking. Bradley, who did you hear from that you can put Predator rod bearings in a clone rod? That is inaccurate. The clone rod is built specifically for the clone engine. The Predator rod is built specifically for the Predator. And the Hemi and the non-Hemi take the same Predator rod. That's a lot of people get confused about that. When I hear people say, I have a Predator 212 clone engine, you don't. A clone is an exact copy. The 196 clone is a copy of the GX200, which has a certain bore and a certain stroke, certain size valves. Predator 212, bigger engine. Some of the parts work, some of them don't. But anyway, the rod journal on a clone is 8,000 smaller in diameter than the Predator is. So, when we make a connecting rod, we make it from the bearing up. We get the bearings made for it, the right diameter, the right circumference and width and all, and then we make the rod from that up. So they will not interchange. If people saying they're doing it, they need to play the lottery, because they're very lucky that something doesn't break, especially if you're putting Predator bearings in a clone rod to put it on I don't know what you'd put that on, but that's inaccurate. No bearing from any other OEM style rod will fit in another engine, with the exception of like the flathead stuff, because most of the stroker stuff, like the stroker crankshaft for the clone and the animal, take the 1-inch flathead bearing. But as far as the Predator and clone, the OEM style stuff or OEM crankshafts, they're specific. A Cobb told you. I haven't told you that. The difference in a restricted plate carb and an adult carb. I really try, and I've done a lot of work on this, spent a lot of time on this, of making carbs that will work in the unrestricted as well as the plate carbs, with the exception of the red. I hate red plate engines. They make me throw things. But there are certain things that we do different for plate carbs than we do unrestricted. The biggest thing is filing down the throttle stop on it. One thing you want to do is, if you notice, if you ever put the plate up there and put the carb on it and open the throttle and shine a light up in there, you notice that the hole is off-centered a little bit on the plates over to the left. So what we do is we cut the throttle shaft so that it opens a little bit past full, and to help direct the air a little bit over there. And that gives you, when you do that, that actually helps the low end signal on it, which is why we work our carbs off the low side so much. Even the unrestricted carbs, we're running the same low speed jet as we do the main jet in most cases. My unrestricted carbs will come to you with a 36 low speed and a 36 main. And there's times on the plate engines, like I said before, we'll run 2, 3, 4 thousandths bigger on the low speed, especially in the small plates, than we do on the main. And turning that throttle shaft over helps direct that air. That's the biggest thing that we do different from a red plate or a plate carburetor to an unrestricted is that. Other than that, they're built basically the same, other than the jetting. What is a stock max RPM number done? Man, this chair sounds awful. That's the chair, that's not me. I didn't have tacos for dinner. Anyway, max RPM with no work done, just tie the governor back. Stock cams with stock springs, with stock timing, typically about 54, 55. If I'm not mistaken, when these engines first come out, when we started racing them, still had the tanks on the top, the clone engines. They were the blue engines back then. This is for the box stock project. I'm wanting to say 54, 55 is, and we took the governors off of them. It was about all we could get out of them. So I don't recommend taking a stock engine that hadn't been clearanced right and trying to turn those kind of RPMs, because back then we would take the engines and find the crappiest thin weight oil we could, because we wasn't supposed to go through them. We was actually trying to run legit back then and not build the engines on the side like they do now. But we would take the engines and boil them down to a stand and find the crappiest 20 weight oil we could, put it in there, and let the engine run for like 2 hours. Just sit there and run, break in and clearance, self-clearance and all that. But when these engines come over, that's like when we sell our U-build kits, other people sell their U-build kits, those engines are not ready for high RPMs. Now, they may run fine on a generator, turning 3,600 RPMs, running your lights. But when you go to revving that engine up higher, 45, 55, 6,000 RPMs, things move around inside there. The connecting rod, as it pulls the piston up and down, the circle, it's flexing, and you need, more clearance in there to get more oil in there, to lubricate it better, to pad it better, when the rod comes up and down and stopping and starting the piston. You need more piston clearance because the piston's moving faster, creating more friction. You need more, better cross hatching. You need better, ring clearance, stuff like that, so that things move smoother, so that things are round and, not out of round, or the clearances be tighter at the top, smaller at the bottom, whatever. But, a stock engine, a lot of people have problems like that with the Predators. They get them out of the box, they slap them on a go-kart, and they hit the track wide open, and in 2 laps it throws a rod out the front. That's because it wasn't clearanced. You have to clearance this stuff in order for the engine to turn the RPMs that you want it to. It's just like you got to prepare the engine for a race. Just like you wouldn't, like Shannon Portwood a while ago, just now getting up from his nap off his recliner, he wouldn't just go out and run a 2-mile race. He'd have to prepare himself work out and prepare his body for the race. Same way you got to prepare an engine for the race. You got to clearance it and get certain specs, certain torque specs, stuff like that before you just go run them. There I go, getting off on another subject again. But pros and cons of full roller rockers compared to roller tips. It's interesting you say that because I don't know if he wants me to tell anybody this or not, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm testing the new gauge roller rockers. They're a full roller rocker. They're a roller tip, and they're a roller bearing, around the main shaft. God, I hate this chair. I gotta get another chair for next time. This is aggravating me. Anyway, the full roller compared, I assume you're talking about the roller tips that we sell from NR. They're a good rocker. I mean, they're very strong roller tips, but they're not a full roller shaft mounted type system. The roller tip, I use them on a lot of engines. The benefit to that, of course, is right here, there's no roller tip. You got friction. Just like anything, you sit there and rub on it, you're gonna build heat, and it's gonna slow down eventually because of the friction on it. Roller tip, it rolls back and forth and reduces friction, reduces heat. The benefit, that's the benefit over a non-roller, is you got friction right here, roller right here, you're reducing friction, reducing heat, it frees up horsepower. It doesn't make more horsepower, it frees it up, which meaning as this rubs, builds heat, starts slowing down, just like anything you rub on builds friction, it gets harder and harder. And the higher the RPMs you go, the more friction it builds. With a roller tip here, you don't have that. It's not making more power, it's freeing up power that it was robbing before. Now a full roller system, that are shaft mounted and have rollers in here, there again, with the roller tip, you got the little adjuster nut that goes in there. That's metal to metal in there. And that thing is running back and forth and building heat. And it's, of course, it's not staying straight. They're going around, and you're not getting exact, motion all the time. With a shaft-mounted system, everything is kept straight, and friction is greatly reduced. Everything is perpendicular, doesn't wobble side to side, move back and forth, and heat is reduced, friction is reduced. There again, freeing up power. We've seen some power increases with the new gauge rockers. They're some nice rockers. We've had very little problems with them. Most of the problems we've had with people are from installing them incorrectly or not setting the lash at the proper stroke. But the true roller system just frees up power. It's like going from a needle bearing clutch to a brass bushing clutch. Like you take our mongrel, which is based off of the max torque. In fact, they make them for us. The max torque clutch that's been modified and this, that, and the other. But it takes the needle bearings drivers from bullies and towmars. You take one of those clutches and take the standard max torque, and you grease up the bushing on it and spin it. It's going to turn, but it's not going to turn. You take the needle bearing one and spin, it's going to turn a lot more. It's not making more power, it's freeing up power that friction is holding back. Jeff, buddy, if your back sounds like this, you need to go to a chiropractor tomorrow, because that's awful. Of course, you are a lot older than I am, too. Yeah, Cody, that's I hate to say, badly put together engines, but, there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. A lot of people argue about proper clearances, how to set them. Do you do it hot? Do you do it cold? Do you heat this? Do you freeze that? Do you use, flex hones here? Do you use stone hones there? But putting this stuff together, there's a technique to everything. And, proper torque specs. That goes a long way. A long way. The only thing that I really care about torquing in these engines is, of course, the connecting rod, the flywheel, the side cover, and the head bolts. Other than that, just tighten them. It's not that hard. Just tighten them. But stock rods, a lot of people like to over torque them. I know, building these engines, building all these modifieds and stuff, and we're torquing at 170 inch-pounds, and that torque wrench is being pulled on and a loud click, and then you build a stock one, and that 120 inch-pounds is like you barely touch it. Is it tight enough? How does it stay tight like that? But it does. They're weaker bolts. They stretch the bolts, and therefore they stay tight. But a lot of people are over torquing stock rods, and what that does is it distorts the hole. I mean, if you take it out and if you over torque it to hone the rod, or size it, you don't need to use a flex hone. You need to use stone hones, and there I do, to get the size right. If you torque it back to that same spec, it should be fine in there. But there again, you're overstretching those little stock bolts, and they'll break. That's why torque specs on stuff like that is very, very important. And a lot of people don't use torque wrenches. I know some builders, some well-known builders, that don't use torque wrenches. They'll put stock rods, billet rods in engines, but they've been doing it so long that they can kind of have the feel. But then they, wind up telling somebody that, no, I don't use torque wrenches. I've been doing this for 25 years. I can feel it. They probably can. I probably can. I've always used a torque wrench. My granddad grew up working with Smoky Unix, and that man tells you something, you listen. And I wish I'd have listened a lot more than what I did, because I was real young back then. But they don't use torque wrenches, and they probably get them where they need to be because they don't have a lot of problems with it. But they tell these other people that, and it's kind of miscommunication in some ways, and it confuses people. But proper torque specs is very important. Cam I recommend for mid to top end on a 1/6 mile dirt track. There again, it goes back to what kind of carburetor are you running, what kind of fuel are you running, what kind of head work has been done. If you're looking for a mid to top end, you're going to need something like the F275 or the 308. Those are the two biggest modified cams that we sell. I use the F275 in all the stock appearing style carb engines, which means 650, 675, 680 bore carburetors. It just helps them work a lot better. It's got a fast ramp on it, which is what a stock carburetor likes. And a lot of the 390 carbs engines I'll use that cam, but I'll also use the 308. The 308 works really good with big carburetors, in my opinion. 390s are Tillotons. That's 308. They ain't much better than them. That's a really good cam, but you got to turn them. Brian, clone rods breaking. Are we talking OEM rods, billet rods, or what? Because I'm not seeing stock rods break. The AKRAs, you may have some here or there, that's been run too long, or they're just trying to turn them 7100. But I'm not seeing stock rods break. And I'm a big advocate against putting billet rods in these stock engines. I don't see a need for it. Even though we make them and we sell them, I don't see a need for a billet rod in these stock engines for two reasons. Number one, we're not seeing them break. I may get a call in the morning that somebody broke one this weekend, or I may get a call Monday, but we're just not seeing it. Everything has limitations. I tell people, they call in and say they're trying to turn these engines 7071 because they seen somebody want to race somewhere turning 7100. And that's probably true, but that engine's probably gone through after every single race. And you're trying to run your engine 2 or 3 races, and just because it will don't mean you got to do it. Now, I've turned engine 74, 75 on a dyno before just to show that it can be done. But all these stock rods, they have a limitation, just like your automobile. I'm not sure what kind of vehicle you drive, but I'm just going to say, a Chevy truck, the tachometer will measure 8,000 RPMs. Do you drive it there all the time? No, you don't, because you know that if you get in your Chevy truck and peg that tachometer out all the time, that something's going to break. These engines are the same way. We have all found out where the threshold is to cross to where parts start breaking. We're there now. If things keep changing, you will see stuff breaking. But right now, we're just not seeing stock rods break. And the ones that are either running them too hard for too long, or they're not clearancing them properly, which will be the same for the billet rods. Just because it's billet doesn't mean it won't break. I hear a phrase all the time that it's got an ARC unbreakable rod in it. We didn't make it. There's no such thing as an unbreakable rod. But there is a rod that will last a long, long, long time through multiple builds, multiple engines, if it's maintained and installed properly. If you go back to the video I done a while back about rod clearancing and putting connecting rods in, how to check them, and doing the torque sequences and all, that's important. I mean, we found that out through years and years and years and years of manufacturing rods, building rods, making rods, and breaking rods. We've broke rods. I've broken several billet rods over the years. But it's because I either run it too long at the flatheads. We used to turn them opens 9,500, 10,000. And I try to run them 12 races that way, and it opened up the clearances on the rod and hammer the bearings and break the bolts. But the biggest problem with billet rods breaking is they're installing them wrong. They're not clearancing. I get it all the time. I bought a rod from you. I expected it to be the right size when I got it. 99.999% of the time, the rod is the proper size. The bearing is the proper size. I mean, there's so many checks on our products before they go out the door. There's so many hands that touch them. So many people that check them time and time and time and time and time again. Can something get out of our shop that's not right, that's maybe off a little bit? Yeah, I mean, those are machines, but they're doing what human hands are telling them to do. But it's not common. It's rare when it happens, but it can happen. Most of the time, they're taking our rod that is basically sized right when you get it out of the box and putting it on a crankshaft that's too big. They're not checking the crankshaft. They're not doing the simple plastic gauge test like I showed. They're not miking it. Most of the clone crankshafts I get in, are too big. Almost 1,000's too big. And, when you got too little oil clearance on it, it'll tighten down. It'll spin on it. Everything feels fine. But there's only 1 to 1.5, maybe right at 2,000's oil clearance. You turn these things up to 8,000 RPM, 7,500 RPMs. There again, even though it's billet, the rod is still doing this as it pulls that piston up and down. And oil clearances increase in some places and decrease in other places. And it runs the bearing dry, which opens up the clearances on it. And if the clearances are too much, when you get to the 4, 5, and 6,000ths rod clearance, the crankshaft has a chance to have a running start at the top and the bottom, and that's called hammering. And once it gets to beating down that cap so much, it breaks the bolts. But back to the original thing, we just don't see. If you were talking about stock rods, we don't see them break. And I'm going to stay an advocate against the billet rod in it, which I don't have no say in it. But I'm going to tell people when they ask me, I don't see a need for billet rods in these engines unless the rules are changed to where you have to have one. If I'm not getting into all of that, but right now we're just not seeing it, and I don't know if people are breaking them left and right. It's got to be something that, with the stock rods, they're not clearancing them right or not torquing them right. And I get in debates with people all the time, especially on Bob's 4-cycle, that about honing rods to clearance them. Yes, I hone rods to clearance it, but I do not use a ball hone. A ball hone is nothing more than a surface breaker. It scuffs the surface, leaves cross hatches in it for oil retention. We've done that on the flatheads years ago. But if the rod's out of round, it's not going to make it round again. It's just going to make it look pretty. And you need stones to get in there, just like you do a cylinder. You know, the piston cylinder, you can run a ball hole up down it all you want to. It'll make it bigger, but it's not going to make it the right size. You got to get them stones in it to make it the right size, and then you can finish up with a ball hone. I do. I got a ball hone and a plateau brush that I finish up with, but it's only run through 2 or 3 times for crosshatch purposes. That's it. But the two things I don't like about people using a ball hone on these rods is, number one, like I said, it don't make it round if it's out of round, and two, the finish on that rod. I've said before that it's a hardened finish. It's technically not a hardened finish. It's where the machining smooths out the surface of the metal and covers up the pores in that cheap aluminum that they're made out of. And you look on the side of it, it looks like it's been sandblasted. That's how the rod looks throughout. You break one, it looks the same on this side. It's sand casted. And if you hone that rod with those machining, where it smooths it out, you'll have a thousandths, maybe 2 thousandths in some places, but you hone it out and you break through that and you get into that porous stuff. You can't see it with your eyes because you flex honed it. And if you've broken through, that flex hone covers it up until the engine starts running. And then as things wear, it gets to that porous part, which is technically softer and comes out and embeds. The aluminum is an embedding material. As it wears, it sticks into itself, and that will become like sandpaper on that crankshaft, which is why you see the crankshaft a lot of times wear faster than the rod does. You'll have marks on the bottom of it where the rod has come down at the hardest point of combustion and has wore that crankshaft out because the aluminum, as it wears, embeds in it. And if you get through to that softer material, it embeds quicker and harder and opens up the rod, hammers it, and either locks it to the crankshaft or it breaks it. All right, I gotta take a breather. I told you I get to talking too much. That's why nobody else do this, because I'll talk all night if you let me. Are rollers legal? I assume you mean roller rockers legal in AKRA. No, they are not. They don't need to be. I think the engine package that they got right now in AKRA, NKA is a good package. Engines are durable. You can run on multiple races. I think the RPMs are creeping up a little too high for my comfort, but it's a good package. You don't have a lot of failures. And the DIYer, the garage builders, the guys that build them on their tables that they clean fish on sometimes still have a chance to keep up, because of companies like us and many other companies out there that build custom blueprinted parts, heads and carburetors, which is where the power is actually made at. Most anybody can build a good short block. If you got good sun and hone, good stone hone, you can get the clearances right, get the cylinder right. But the power of any engine is the head and the carburetor. That's how it breathes. If you can't breathe, you can't perform. I tell people again all the time, you can build as much muscle as you want to, Dakota Hill. You can go to the gym, drink all your drinks, and work out all you want to, but you cannot run a 100-yard dash breathing through a straw. That's how the engine breathes, the head and the carburetor. That's the power maker. And you have companies out there like us and many others that offer blueprinted carbs, blueprinted heads, so the DIYers can keep up. Now, if things change a lot, then that's going to hurt the DIYers. And our company, we live off of Saturday nighters. The lights that are on here at my house, and I'm shooting this at my house, the lights that are on at the shop, the electricity that runs those machines, the pen that signs our check is all bought from Saturday Night Racers. The DIYers, the backyard guys, the mini bike guys, the guys that are building these little engines to put on the drift trikes. That's our people. That's who we that's who we build for. That's what we open the doors for every day, is those type of people. And but right now, I don't know how I got off on this on rollers legal. No, roller rocker arms are not legal on AKRA. All you can run is, they got two types of rockers out there, two types of shaped rockers. There's several different designs of them, but your basic one is, your normal round tip rocker, and then they got the square tip rocker. The square tip rocker you can get in a little shorter ratio, because most of the ones, what I call the standard ones, are really long. You put them on, a CL2 or CL3 BSP cam, you're going to have a little too much lift, and you're going to have to do a lot of grinding up here to get it to meet the maximum lift requirements. And at one time we could get a hold of the short. We're trying to find some more of the short ones. They're getting kind of hard to find, but these are the only ones that are legal for AKRA. Best weight oil for most applications on the clone. I only got one word for best weight oil, best karting oil, best oil period. That's our Lucas. And I'll say that because we actually helped Lucas design that oil. Before I get into that, I'll tell you the best weight oil for stock engines, like AKRA stockers, 020, 520, even like a 530 would be fine. As you get more modified, you need a little thicker oil. If you notice, all of our stock rods, the paperwork that comes with it, we recommend a medium weight oil for all applications, because the billet rods are so dense, or so strong that they don't flex and bend like a stock rod does. So the bearing itself takes all the impact on the crankshaft. So you need a medium weight oil to give it the cushioning and and the lubrication that it needs. But I recommend our Lucas oil to everybody, because that's something that I personally, us at ARC, but me personally doing the testing and helping get it right, help Lucas do that. They had a karting oil that they sent me originally, and I'm not sure really what they changed on it, but they got it right. That's some good stuff. I use it, our Lucas karting oil, I use it in everything from red plate engines, and it's in my 390 right now. Stroker 390 build that we done, right out the bottle, no additives in it. It's a 30 weight. It's a 30 weight viscosity as far as protection. It protects the engine like a 30 weight, but it has a dispersion agent in it that disperses, it atomizes, as well as a 020. That's why you can run anything. It's a one and done. Gasoline, methanol, nitro, whatever. Okay, I plugged Lucas now. Maybe I can get a free t-shirt. You broke, Brian Starks, you broke 2, I'm assuming, connecting rods. Is this a billet rod again, or is OEM? Okay, I see that up there. Don't know, man. As long as you're clearancing them right and not flex honing them, that's OEM parts, man. They're made in China. But like I say, I haven't seen problems with it. I may get 15 phone calls tomorrow saying we got broke rods, but give me a call in the morning. We'll go over some stuff about clearancing and what you're doing versus what I'm doing, and see if we can find a problem. Just give me a call. A 390, when did they require a billet rod? As soon as you buy it. No, 390s, they're a big engine, a lot of torque, even in stock form, a lot of torque. You don't have to turn them a whole lot of RPMs. I know people that run them in, mini cups and stuff like that. Even, some backyard racing that they don't never turn them over, 6,500. And as long as the crankshaft is balanced and the rod has been clearanced properly and torqued properly, everything is good in it. The stock rod, depending on the modifications to it, we're good up to 5,500, 6,000. But There again, that's a lot of rotating mass in there. And if you're doing any modifying to it, especially with compression, porting the head, bigger carburetor, all that stuff is designed, cam profiles, lift, duration, valve sizes, porting, carburetor, all that works in conjunction to do one thing: bring more fuel mixture into the engine. When I say fuel mixture, I mean air and fuel. It brings more in there, which creates more cylinder pressure when you combust. So that's kind of your call, buddy, about when they require a billet rod. How much modifying are you doing to it? How much more cylinder pressure are you putting on it? How many RPMs do you want to turn it? But the stock rods hold up fairly well, like I say, because you don't have to turn them that hard. Now we turn, our engine, our stroker engine, that's my kid. It's getting close to bedtime, so he gets really wild and really silly around bedtime. So if you hear something in the background, hooping or hollering, or you see a toy hit me upside the head, that's just my kid being my kid. How long would you run the Animal 6249 rod? That's our beefy modified rod. It don't matter when the rod was made, it matters how long it's run. I've got some rods laying around that's brand new from 2005 that I'd put in any engine because they've never been run. But far as, I'm assuming if you got a 6249 that it's probably a modified engine. It's not really the rod itself that we worry about, because the Animal has a really bad rod ratio. Rod ratio is how much stroke the crankshaft has, total stroke, versus how long the rod is to how long the piston is. There's certain ratios you want to get to. Something popped up I was reading, I'm sorry. But the Animal has a really low ratio, and it's got a long stroke with a short rod and a long heavy piston. And that short rod ratio with that long stroke is really violent. When the piston goes up and it gets to the top to come back down, it doesn't slow down. It snatches it back down at the bottom. It pushes it up real hard and it snatches it down. It's just a violent motion. But with the 6249, no matter what the modifications are on it, I'd say every 5 or 6 races change the bolts and the bearings in it. If nothing else, the bolts, because those rods take a beating in those engines. That's why anytime somebody talks about making a modified Animal, the first thing I tell them is wide scope piston, long rod. And that's going to solve a lot of your problems. It's going to move. You can get a lighter, shorter piston with a longer rod, and it's going to give you a much better ratio. It's going to increase the dwell time, which is when the piston reaches the top, it slows down a little bit before it snaps back down. And plus, that longer rod puts different angles of push on the crankshaft, and it just increases the amount of pressure applied on the crankshaft in different angles, which makes more power. But like I say, if it's an Animal modified, it ain't the rod that you worry about. It's the bearing wearing on them a little faster, opening up the clearances and hammering the bolts. So just keep a check on that and you should be fine. The rod length for the 212cc Predator engines, I just had a complete brain fart. I want to say it's 3.308, I believe it is. God, I can't remember what that is. Guess I've talked too much. But it's we have a standard length Predator connecting rod. It's the part number 6254. That's the standard length. It's the same length as what's in the engine stock. So wherever the piston is with that stock length rod in the hole, when you put the 6254 in it, it's going to be right back at that same position. And we got one that's 20 thousandths longer, which will move the piston up 20 thousandths. That's a 6256. And we've also got one that's 40 thousandths longer if you want to use the Hemi flat top piston in the non-Hemi block. That's the only combination that I work with is the Hemi piston and the non-Hemi block. But that's a part number 6252. Travis, I'm assuming you're talking about the OEM rods being out of round. I don't see them. They're not that bad. I mean, I've seen the Predator ones. Now the Predator rods, they're bad. But there again, that's a whole nother company making a whole nother engine for a whole nother genre or whatever. But the clone rods, the ones that we get in, the precision cast rods and the the OEM style rods are, they're not that bad. A little bit of just touching them a little bit. Usually, I don't see them out of round more than a half to maybe 7/10 of a thousandth. And if I can get them down to below a half, I'm good with it, as long as the crankshaft is round. Now the crankshaft is just as important about being out of round or out of round than the rod is. I make sure my crankshaft is less than a tenth to start with. Now rebuilds, I tend to go up a little higher if I want to use the same crankshaft again. But crankshaft's got to be round also. Yeah, Jeff, you would say Lucas is some good stuff, especially with all them decals all over the side of your cart. And you get more free stuff from Lucas than I do. That's not good. I'm proud you're doing it. You do a good job advertising it. Okay, Shannon. I hope Connor's not looking at this, because dude got his driver's license yesterday, and now you're online talking about tucking him in bed and reading him a bedtime story. I hope what you're reading is some type of paperwork that I've sent you to keep his mind sharp and focused on upcoming races y'all are going to, especially the one around Thanksgiving, because I want some wins out there. Balancing, I'm assuming you're talking about cartwheelers. I assume you're talking about balancing the crank assembly. Far as balancing that, what you got to have the crankshaft, the connecting rod, wrist pin, piston, and rings, and flywheel. And you would you spin test it, and there you take. Typically what we do is we take between 58-60% of the connecting rod piston weight, and that's what we use for a bob weight on the crankshaft to balance it. But you've got to have it. It also helps to have the clutch there too, but the clutch is not necessary, but you do need a flywheel, the entire bottom end assembly, crankshaft, flywheel, rod, piston, wrist pin, rings, bearings, bolts, everything. And you'll use 58%, typically 58 to 60%, depending on where you want the balance to be. You want a more low end balance or 10,000 RPM balance or whatever. You use 58 to 60% of the weight to use for a bob weight on the crankshaft. That's how we do it. And all of our flywheels, whether it's the non-adjustable or the adjustable flywheels, the ultralights, the 3-horse diameter, whatever, they're all zero balanced, from the factory. So you shouldn't have no problem with balancing there. Now, one thing you will get into as far as balancing is like with our ultralights. They're so light that they don't absorb harmonics like they should. A flywheel has three purposes. Typically three purposes. Number one, it holds the magnet to fire the coil. The fins, if it's got fins, are designed to move air, to move as little as possible, but enough to keep the engine cool. And it also aids in balancing by absorbing harmonics. And harmonics are vibrations that the engine causes, or that are caused by the engine running, whether it's, the crankshaft may not be balanced just right, or because of it flexing, because when you balance a crankshaft, you're spinning it, and it's not really flexing like it does in an engine, because you don't spin it up that fast. And when you spin one up 6, 7, 8,000 RPMs, and the crankshaft starts flexing, which way does the balance go? Does the balance go heavy? Does the balance go light? That's where a flywheel comes in at. It's out there helping absorb some of those harmonics that are going through the engine. And when you get these ultralight flywheels that we got, they rev quick, they accelerate quick, but they're so light at 1.7 pounds that it doesn't absorb the harmonics like a 3.4 pound one would do like this. It helps absorb harmonics. But that's how we balance stuff. You got to have all that together in order to get a true balance. But there again, it's a single cylinder engine. You cannot balance a single cylinder engine for the entire. You may get one that when you fire it up, you can set a cup of water on top of it and you won't hardly ever see the water move. But when you rev it up and the crankshaft starts flexing and stuff starts moving around, it goes back out of balance. But just how much, nobody really knows. You can't really measure that in a single cylinder engine. Jeff, I'd like to send you an ARC shirt, but to be honest with you, we don't sell them. There's only one person at ARC Racing that has shirts, and that's me. I get these shirts, to wear to shows and stuff like that, and I'll wear them out. I ain't got but a couple or three, but we used to have t-shirts years ago, but selling t-shirts kind of can become a problem at times. I'd like to get back into it, but then again, I don't know if we want to. But I got several other people that's been wanting shirts from me, but that might be something we get into a little later. Don't know if we'll do, actual t-shirts or, polo shirts or whatever. I don't know. That's for higher ups to decide than me. But I got these shirts made with my own dime to go to these shows and stuff with. So sorry, I can't help you. I mean, I can get a white t-shirt and, write ARC on it and send to you, but you're going to send me that Lucas shirt first. Kind of scroll back because I missed a few things up here. Dual bearing 460 side cover. Yeah, that's our newest side cover. We just got that done. They spent a lot of time on that one and the 390 cover. Making them right because big block side cover. There's a lot of stuff in there flexing around, and all of our side covers have a dual bearing option. I think we make one for the animal that's not dual bearing, but all the other ones are. And what that does, the dual bearings help control crank flex because the bearings, you'll have. I actually got a side cover here too. Inside there, you'll have the two bearings lined up side by side, and each bearing has 2 points of contact on it, which gives you 4 points there, along with the actual billet cover using all the dowel pins in the block, and holds the block together a lot better. Controls block flex, block fatigue, and this chair is driving me crazy. But controls block flex, fatigue, crankshaft flex, just keeps everything in line and a little more durable, especially for high RPM, high compressions type stuff. But we're proud of the 460 side cover. It turned out really, really good, as did all of our other side covers. They're not only the best looking in the business, but the best in the business. All of our side covers come with rubber O-rings. I think the one for the animal I don't believe does, but all of our other ones come with rubber O-rings, which you can't beat for seal. That's the ultimate in seal, and they come with all the shims and extra gaskets you may need. The 460 and the big block, the 390 side covers, I don't believe they don't come with paper gaskets because we haven't seen a need to use them yet. Now the ones for the clones and the Predator engines, they'll come with the rubber O-ring gasket, and they'll come with a OEM paper gasket. And the reason that is because there's so many inconsistencies between the Honda block, the clone block, and also the three different generations of Predator blocks. We send you several shims along with extra gaskets. That way you can set your end play exactly where it needs to be. There's some circumstances where you don't have enough in play with just the O-ring on it and no shims. There's no in play, so you take the rubber O-ring off and put the paper gasket on there, which will give you more. Then you can use the shim to set your in play. So we send a lot more stuff with those side covers than we do the big blocks, because we've just seen that the big blocks are a lot more consistent. Scotty Williams, I mean, I've got paperwork that we send out with, like our U-Build kits, and when you buy just a basic, in the box engine, it's got all the torque specs for the connecting rod, head, the side cover. It's got recommended piston clearance, ring gap clearance, rod clearance, stuff like that. I'll be glad to send you one. Just hit us up tomorrow and I can email it to you, whatever. Be glad to get that to you. That way, you'll have all that information. LJ, the 390 crankshafts and all, some people still run the counterbalancers like in the mini cup stuff, and but most of the karters, especially the ones that use them for UAS or outlaw racing, open racing, they take the counterbalancers out because that's less rotational mass that's in there. And that little thing up there may help balance the engine a little bit, but that's more that's spinning inside the engine. It's creating friction from oil getting on it and air spinning it around. That's just more friction on the engine. So most people take those out and they get the crankshafts balanced with the procedure that I talked about before. They take the crankshaft, the rod, the flywheel, piston rings, yada yada, and to a engine or machine shop, and they balance them with bob weights and all. Some people will grind them down and then add heavy metals to it to get it balanced, and some people use the shaft the way it is. And hold on, sorry. That's my boss man texting me. When Hunter texts, I gotta kind of stop. He does hand me my check on Fridays. But 390 balancing. Yeah, but most people take those out. Depends on what you're using the engine for, whether you need to leave it in or not. But if you leave it in and you want to put one of our billet rods in it, you may have some clearancing issues there. And if you take it out, then you're going to have some balancing issues. I know some people that take them out and don't get the crankshaft balanced. I've actually seen some of these karts sitting on the grid, basically bouncing off the ground. They're so out of balance, but they run them that way. But that's whether you need a counterbalancement or not depends on what you're doing with the engine. Jared, making a fluid damper is what you're talking about there. You really couldn't do that, I don't think, with a single cylinder engine, because it would it would have the way the single cylinder, the way it balances, like I was talking about a while ago, is without flex. And these things flex so much that at high RPMs that fluid wouldn't. I don't think it would stay consistent. I don't know. I mean, that might be something that we need to look at. I don't know. I don't know where to even start with something like that, but I guess using one of my old fluid dampers I got sitting out here in the shop would be a good start off of one of my old late models. But I don't think that would work too good on a single cylinder engine, but it might be something worth looking into. So we might look into it. I'll give you that. Yeah, Travis, you're right. There's places that's got torque specs. You'll hear different things here and there. The torque specs that I give out is what I personally use on all the engines and all the clearances that I use. I'm not going to give paperwork to somebody that says you need a 3 to 4 thousandths piston clearance when I'm actually running 7. What I on that paperwork is what I use. Piston, rod, everything, all the torque specs, 100%. Paul, if you hadn't bought a 460 side cover yet, I mean, we got them. Just hit our sales desk up in the morning, and I don't think you're going to find as good a product for the price you're getting it at. Them guys work really, really hard on that side cover. Both of them. Actually, all of them. Everything we do, we work hard on. It's all about wearing our pride on our sleeve when them things go out, because there's a piece of all of us in every product that goes out the door. And if we all ain't happy with it, they don't go out. Kind of scrolling back through some questions here. How long have I been in here? 2 hours. And I said this wasn't going to be but like a 30 or 45 minute thing. I didn't want to get wandering off on stuff and being here for 2 hours, but it looks like I've been in here for 2 hours. So I'm probably going to start wrapping this up. Go back through and see if there's anything else. But kind of back to the gel-filled flywheel. That's interesting. I had never thought about anything like that. It might be, some of the guys at the shop may have, but that's got my interest peaked right now. I'm kind of wondering how that would work. But as far as flywheels go, that's something we're always working on. We're always working on flywheels. That never stops. I've got so many different models sitting on my shelf up there on my table that I've had on the dyno that we've tried here and tried there, and we found stuff, we didn't find stuff, we found some unexpected stuff, and but we're always working on flywheels, and that's something that I can have a discussion with some people tomorrow about. They may laugh at me, but I'll still go in there and ask them. But anyway, I'm fixing to get this wrapped up. 5 o'clock comes early in the morning. It's Friday. I think it's Friday. I hope it's Friday. I got myself set up to be Friday, but anything on here that I may not have explained well, or you got other questions about, or some other stuff you want to discuss with us on engines, just give us a call, man. Me and Hunter's hard to get a hold of sometimes, but we'll we do what we can to talk with people as much as we can. We usually are not you get on the phone with us, you get a quick short answer and then gone, and we'll talk with you, let you know what you need to know, and but give us a call in the morning. I got an email also. You can email questions to sales@arcracing.com, or you can email me direct at Jody at arcracing.com. That's Jody at arcracing.com. Phone numbers, of course, 800 521 3560. And you can send us questions on Facebook, whatever. Sending questions on Facebook, sometimes I get overloaded on my personal page or other pages, and I just get so far behind on messages that I can't answer them all. I do my best to do it, so if you ever send me a question on Facebook or whatever, and it takes a couple of days to get to it, I ain't ignoring you. I'm backed up and got so many to do that I try my best to get to them all. I don't always do, but I try. But any more questions, just hit me up in the morning, and glad y'all spent the evening with me. We'll be getting another session here up in 2 weeks. Like I said, I'm going to try to do it every other Thursday at around 8 p.m. Eastern. I hope they don't go this long all the time, but if they do, that's fine. This is what I do. It's what I live for 24/7. So we'll get a topic of discussion up for next time, and hope to see y'all back with us. Y'all have a good evening.